All right, hello. Special edition tip-off. Due to all of the comments from Karl Malone on 1280 The Zone, Greg Miller on his blog post, Greg in Utah. I wasn't intending to comment on this for a few reasons, but the amount of people asking and the level of the story now, if I don't say anything, it becomes ridiculous. Here are the reasons I wasn't going to talk about it. One, I'm an employee of the organization. Uh, I really uh, quite definitely feel as though the organization has always given me free reign in everything I've done, and that despite accusations from fans who get fired up that you're just a shill for the team, I've never in my life ever had a time in which I'm commenting on something and feel as though the organization dictates what I'm saying. And I'm not saying this is either, but I'm not sure that I think anybody can actually get over the fact that I'm an employee of the organization as I make these comments. So, therefore, I'm going to stay out of opinion the best I possibly can because I just don't think that I don't think I have like a leg to stand on. I guess and the second thing is I know an awful lot um, that I probably am not able to share. One of our first games last year was in Phoenix right after the event, and I had a very long dinner, which I've never revealed, with Greg Miller. Um, and I think I got really raw, truthful emotions that happened that night. Um, in retrospect, some of that might have been um, anyway. So uh, it's hard for me here to try to give you something which I really feel you're going to take with any great level. I'm not going to get into a critique of what Carl said or what Greg said. I'm going to try to just deal with facts. Okay? Clearly, I'm somewhat uncomfortable with this, and I'm not sure I have value doing it. So you'll have to decide what you think. All right, let's just deal with the meeting that took place a year ago, February, during the Chicago Bulls game. Okay, here's what we all know: Darren changes some plays in the first half. He and Jerry go at it in the locker room. Everybody was there, says it wasn't anywhere near one of their top 10 blowups of all time, and yet it escalated to a higher level before. Um, Jerry was completely worn out by the circumstance or worn out by the uh, Darren, whatever. And anyone who's around the team kind of knew that in a lot of ways. Jerry is one of the greats of all time, gives every ounce of everything he had, and he probably knows better than anyone else that it wasn't there. Now, facts. Darren and Jerry got into it. Darren was wearing Jerry out. Darren was a pain. Jerry's a forceful man who has the way he wants things done. Okay? And that relationship soured. That day at halftime, uh, Greg, Greg was in there, and they got to the end. Jerry they got to the end of the game, and they met all night. I was in the arena all night, and they asked Jerry to sleep on it. They asked Jerry to come back. They wanted Jerry back. Um, the next morning, Gail met, and every indication of anyone I've ever talked to is that they wanted Jerry to continue. If much as anything else, see if Jerry could get through the year and evaluate in the offseason if he still had it. For all we know, don't know this. This is speculation. For all we know, they knew they were trading Darren. Kind of saying to Jerry, your problem's going away. I mean, it was pretty soon afterwards, right? And if you listen to Kevin O'Connor, uh, all of the approach was that the Nets and the Knicks are bidding, and we're going to take whichever one loses. They may have known at that time. And I also know, hopefully not revealing stuff I shouldn't, that, as much, Kevin didn't make this decision in 24 hours. He worked very hard to find out if he were to move Darren, what his other options were. And it was clear to him that the New Jersey or the Knicks package were superior to anything else. So that backs up to me the whole idea that Greg and Gail really wanted him to stay and try. A lot of things happened that night that I can't reveal. All of them to me from what I've been told, back up the idea that uh, Greg and Gail and the organization wanted them to stay. Phil Johnson is was on with DJ and PK, and I thought reiterated that. Phil Johnson works for the organization right now, which either means one of two things. You can put what he says in doubt, or you can figure if he was really that offended, he wouldn't be working for the organization right now. The final thing is that Karl wasn't in those meetings and hasn't talked to Jerry. Those are facts. And the other one is when Karl refers to the Jerry he knows as his basis for his comments, that is Jerry, but that's also Jerry at 55 instead of 70. Okay. Karl's other complaints are that Darren went above Jerry on things. I'm certain that's true. That's Darren. And there's no question that Darren and Jerry's communication had fallen apart. Darren didn't feel comfortable going to Jerry, or whatever, or Jerry didn't take it, or Darren didn't feel comfortable. Whoever, I don't care whose side it's on. And so Darren went above. I have no doubt on that. Now, how the organization deals with that, whether they should have told Darren to never in his lifetime ever talk to Kevin O'Connor, seems kind of unlikely to me. Disgruntled player, upset, not communicating with coach. Maybe they felt they could try to get that communication better. Darren's personality is what Darren's personality is. Wants different hotel rooms, wants different practice times, wants film sessions. That's who he is. Okay? The ticket complaint. Find it hard to believe, frankly. Did Karl call? Did one of Karl's assistants call? Did Karl's assistant call and ask for 20? Did somebody they didn't realize was Karl's assistant call? Lots of pieces of that information we don't know. Pretty positive that considering the fact that on that night, Karl Malone came to the arena, held a press conference that was organized by the Jazz media staff, which I thought was crazy at the time, frankly, for the organization, because of Karl's tendency to go off. Is a sign, I think, that the organization was letting Karl be Karl in that setting and not trying to mute him. And Karl did damage that night. That's part of Greg's pain. That's a fact. Karl did damage that night. On a probably the most difficult night in the history of the organization, their legendary player came back and did damage. Now, I can't think of any other player who has that level with a franchise who's ever done that. That's probably where Greg's pain's coming from. This is who Karl is. That's what Greg tries to portray. I mean, I have my great Karl experience where in Boise, Idaho, he goes off about Ostertag getting all the more money than him and this and that. And Ostertag's getting paid more. And I sit down at the end of the thing and I look at Karl. I'm like, that's not true. You make more money than he does next year and the year after. Your contract expires. His has 5 more years, so he makes 35 over the term of the contract, and you're only making 9, but he's not making 35 this year, and or he was making 12, whatever. I don't care if it's not true. That's still the point. Okay, that's Karl. That's what made him brilliant. That's what made him great. If you recall, the next day I actually sat down with Karl, did an interview with her. We kind of corrected some of those things. But that's who Karl is. That's what made him the greatest power forward ever. And in these two circumstances, it probably didn't work as well as it could have. So those are my thoughts. I guess the final thing is, will Jerry ever coach again? Maybe. I mean, I think he's interested, and but I don't think he was interested in coaching anymore in that environment. Phil Johnson said on the postgame show the other day, he gives Tyrone Corbin great credit because this team had a choice of going one way or the other, and somehow Tyrone has gotten them to become a hard-playing team. And that's, I thought that was a great comment by Phil, very honest about, and he said he got him to play harder than we ever got him to play. Bottom line, none of this is good. It's never good when people are spatting. It's too bad. There's obviously really hurt feelings. And the final thing I would say is I think that clearly you see some things out of Greg where, um, there's some pain. There's some real pain in that relationship. And by the way, I guess my final thought would be let's remember that Larry and Karl did this endlessly, and they did it without Twitter, and they did it without uh, Facebook and everything else, and they did it without the ESPN news cycle. And so it stayed in our town, but it happened all the time, all the time, all the time. So the leap that this shows that Greg's different than Larry, it actually might show that Greg is like Larry in a lot of ways. And Greg definitely, I think Greg tried to make a stand for the pride he has in his family and his organization, and you can determine whether you think that was worth it. So those are my thoughts. I hope that was helpful. I know all of you wanted me to comment, and I tried to stay in areas where you'd believe that I have some credibility. All right, see you.